Crayo. This show tonight features Darkblade, Timberwolf, and Crayo. Stay tuned for amazing information about Star Trek Online coming up.
Greetings, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Pilot Review Show. I am Captain Blade J52, and joined this week by my merry cohorts. You heard the man with the intro powers, gifted to him from above by the Q Continuum, Crayo. Assuming my TeamSpeak is not trying to crap again.
Oh, well, we heard you, but what about Timberwolf? Where's that Timberwolf?
Okay, so we're good on that. So I think our Timberwolf is around here somewhere. At least
I
he
was
was
waiting for us to all get introduced. There's no structure to this.
There normally is, but that went out the window thanks to the technical issues.
Well, then you know what? It's that kind of night.
Oh, God. He's already drinking, folks. Well, you heard it there. We also have a resident wolf of the Timber Clan with us.
Yeah, coming off a very successful ship review for one of the new ships that just came out. I'm drinking a beer. Deal with it.
So, yeah, my internet has been acting a little weird. If it craps out at any point during this, then you guys know why. I plan to gripe out my ISP pretty soon.
No problem.
But,
if you drop out, I'll take over and talk about nothing. I mean, how long can one person talk about nothing? Well, I guess we'll find out tonight, won't we? Also, this just in.
Oh my God.
Well, I think I have the title for tonight's episode. Before we even get into it, it's a beer night.
Yeah, apparently so. But, anyways, folks, we do have some interesting stuff to get through for you this week. So let's go ahead and dive into this stuff. First and foremost, we have our blog on commanding the T'Pau scout ship. So, this has been available to us since the 23rd. If you're a weirdo like me and Timber, then you've probably blown some blow by to go ahead and get this ship. But one of the good things about this is one of our scaling Tier 6 starships. They had a lot of success with the previous Walker class, as well as the starting Discovery ship that we had. So, very interesting to see that they're coming out with some of this. Basically, the ship, as soon as you leave the tutorial, you can use this vessel starting from that point, and it will scale all the way up to level 65 with you. So, for example, if you're below level 10, you start out with 9,000 base hull, 2 weapons forward, 2 weapons aft, a tactical console, an engineering console, and 3 science consoles.
This is a good ship because, personally speaking, I generally only have 1 weapon forward and 1 weapon aft myself.
Absolutely. Then you've also got, at level 65, to give you guys an idea of how far it'll scale, you have 40,500 base hull, you have 3 weapons forward, 3 weapons aft, then you have 3 tactical consoles, 3 engineering consoles, and 5 science consoles.
Can I stop you and ask real quick, on the previous ship, you mentioned 2 forward, 1 aft, I believe. Can you mount cannons? And can you mount cannons on the one you just mentioned?
It was actually a 2-2, and yes, you can mount cannons on this vessel.
Nice.
So that's some of our hull scaling values. This is basically going to be a science raider for people that like that kind of thing. We have a little bit more detailed stats. I'm going to skim over these kind of quickly. We've got a shield modifier of 1.3. Then you've got, once you get to 65, it's a 3-3 layout, 2 device slots. You have a commander science. Then you have a Ensign Universal, Lieutenant Universal, Lieutenant Commander Universal, and then a Lieutenant Commander Universal / Intel. So it is a true science raider. It's a base turn rate of 19 degrees a second. It also does include the raider flanking, which is the 25% damage extra to NPCs when attacking in the rear arc. Absolutely. And then 8.25% when attacking players. Can equip dual cannons. Also comes with subsystem targeting, sensor analysis, a secondary deflector slot, and also you get the console rebounding resonant frequencies. Try saying that 10
what
times
does that
fast.
console do?
Essentially, what this console's doing is it's creating a feedback pulse on the target that you selected on. So let's say you put this on, oh, I don't know, one of those command ships in a hive space run. You activate this, a portion of the damage it's going to fire at you, and the portion is dependent on your EPG rating. This is something I've been testing. So it starts off, looks like with no points in EPG, you're looking at about 22.5% of its outgoing damage gets reflected back at itself. And that can increase, so if you have a super high EPG build, it's going to reflect a hell of a lot more of its own damage back on top of it while you're hitting it. It does not critically hit, just like Feedback Pulse. But basically, it can also be almost always be considered a not just a damage booster, but a survival, because you're reflecting its own damage back on it. So you're getting hit for less, and you're basically hitting it for more by it letting itself hit itself. So it's a nice little console as far as basically a broadcastable to single target feedback pulse, but it's feedback pulsing itself, which is just fun to watch. So if that command ship tries to do its lance, that we've seen with feedback pulses get feedback pulsed quite nicely, it's going to lance itself, at least to some degree.
Indeed. And then you actually get the emergency responses trait. And I actually have this trait. Let me pull that up in game so I can give you guys some exact numbers.
Which, from what I understand for this trait, pretty much if you're just getting into this game, get this starship. If for nothing else, if you don't like science ships, you're not used to them, get it for this trait. This trait is actually really budget friendly as far as its survival. And when you're looking at the activating any science or intel abilities, the heal, that is based on hull and shield healing stats. So depending on what you got in your skill tree and other healing abilities for shield and hull, these numbers can increase. So what you see on Darkblade's ship might not be as much or not as much as what you currently see depending on your skill tree. So just keep that in mind. This can be a very powerful healing trait.
So,
Alright, so
dumb question, how does one acquire this ship?
This is your anniversary ship for this year.
Oh, okay, cool.
Just complete. You can complete your daily Omega molecule stabilization. That'll give you 40 marks. You can add to it. If you complete the 2 new mirror discovery missions, you'll get 200 marks from each of the missions. So you're basically starting off day 1 with about 440 marks already completed.
44% of the entire thing.
Yep. Now, keep in mind, folks, the numbers I am going to read off on this are going to be a bit distorted, so I'm going to try to compensate for that a little bit by telling you what they were for me whenever we were in space. That's because we're on a ground map trying to look at a space trait. So it's taking into account the ground numbers. But whenever any shield facing becomes depleted, in space I was getting about a 42,000 secondary shield, or that had 42,000 capacity to it. That shield would last for 30 seconds, could happen once every 60 seconds. And then, while the secondary shield is active, whenever I activate any science or bridge officer ability, I was getting about 4,000 hit points to the ship, and about a 1,200 to each shield facing. So potentially allowing me to double dip on some of my healing powers, which can be boosted, like Timber said, by shield restoration and hull restoration. So that's for those of you that wanted to see some of the numbers and the little bit of the lockout. So,
and don't just
potentially
don't just think about this as double dipping and healing, because this can be rather nice when you're doing things like hazard emitters or emergency power to shields, not emergency power to shields, but science team or transfer shield strength. But also think about it as, since it's science or intel, you can activate polarized hull, which is just damage resistance and immune to tractor beams, and yet you're getting a hull and shield heal. You could activate OSS. Everybody loves to activate, OSS, override subsystem safeties, on their intel ships. Well, with this trait, you activate OSS for the power boost, you're now getting a heal. Ionic turbulence for that AoE debuff shot, now it's also a heal. So it's giving you subspace vortex even, or gravity well, if I'm thinking about it. DRB, Tychon's Rift. You know, you could be attacking your enemy, and you're getting a heal out of it. It really makes your ship versatile, especially at the budget level when you don't have a lot of options available. You could activate something like OSS or Polarized Hull. Now you've got a heal to keep you alive even longer. So this really becomes a very versatile trait when it comes to survival. Even if you're activating a damage ability, you still got a heal out of it.
Absolutely. Which is one of the things I'm actually glad you brought that up. Like I say, for me, I'm looking at it more as it's going to allow me to potentially double dip a little bit. You can combo this with a lot of your damage powers as well, and you can do some pretty nasty stuff with this. So, definitely a trait worth picking up in my personal opinion. You'll definitely get a lot of bang for your buck out of it with this particular ship. So, that's what we've got for our anniversary ship this time around. Now, one thing I do want to mention in case people do run into this issue, if through the course of playing and leveling up with the ship on a tune, if you unlock the ship trait before level 50, you will actually have to wait until level 50 to use it. That's about the only sucky thing that I've seen from this ship so far. Otherwise, it can be pretty nasty. But moving along, we have our updates to hair and skin textures, which has been a bit controversial for some people. Now I'm going to preface this and then...
How could that be controversial? I mean, it's like either she's born with it or it's Maybelline. It's one of the two.
And he went there. But I'm going to explain in just a minute what I mean. So I'm going to preface this. I'm going to explain where the controversy lies, and I'm going to get some thoughts from you guys on the new looks. Now, I don't know how well this is going to translate on the video for you guys, but they show some examples of the old hair shader on a lower end PC and then the new hair shader. You can see there are some bits of difference. You can see some of the more finer details on the hair of the character. And then it explains in the blog, you know, how did you go about making some of these changes. And down below here is probably a better representation of this. You can see here with the Discovery era guy, you can see his hair looks a bit more shiny with the new shader. It still has a little bit to it, but now it doesn't look like he put a gallon of hair gel in his hair and the light's reflecting off of that. Similar with the woman, you can see it's a bit more of a lighter shiny brown, but under a little bit or under the same light now you can actually see it's a true brownish color to the hair. And you see similar kind of effects in the lower bits of lighting too. Now, the controversy that a lot of people are saying is that it messed with a bit of the skin colorations for certain outfits. Some of the outfits, actually quite a few of the outfits from what I was hearing, weren't matching up like they were before, which basically meant people had to change a lot of their outfits, that sort of thing.
Oh, boo-hoo, your space Barbie doesn't match now.
But for some people, I can see where it's where it could be a bit annoying.
I mean,
but
I get it too, but I mean, it is a game. Come on, guys, you know, take it easy.
fair enough. But what about you, Sir Timber? What's some of your thoughts on this one?
I'm going to preempt Timber and just say I am very, very glad to see them updating things like shaders, core bits of the engine. I'm just very happy to see that. Go ahead, Timber. I'm sorry.
But while I'm happy about that, it looks like it's been a hit or miss update for a lot of people. And for some people, and this is probably one of those things that probably half the viewers are going to agree with, when it really comes down to this game, half of the in-game is space and ground Barbie, to be fair. You know, once you've gotten past a certain point where you're comfortable with your build, you've got good damage output, you got good survival, with what content you play, whether it be normal, advanced, or elite, you're at a point where you're comfortable, you don't feel it needs any changes, you're good. That's it. It just becomes about making the ship look the way you want it with shield visuals, deflectors, or all that, or when it comes to the ground, you know, having different armor options and costume options and all that. That becomes your end game, is changing the looks of your character and your ship. So while I'm glad there's been updates and some of them have been for the better, it looks like some have gone south. So it's probably something like, it's good that they've updated it, but it looks like it needs a second pass in some areas. Which,
yeah,
you know...
That's a typical Cryptic thing, is they try hard, and it doesn't necessarily 100% fail, but it's got some rough edges, and in the next 3 to 6 months they'll work those out.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it'll eventually get worked out sooner rather than later, but at least they're trying to do updates to this. Just like with Lighting 2.0, when that first came out, there were some glaring issues, and I mean that word literally, with some of the maps. And they've been slowly working those out as we go. So it's just, I have faith they'll fix it for the better when it comes down to it, especially as they add more options in there. It's just, I'm glad that they're actually working on that, because for some people, when it comes to, you know, ground customizations, that is their thing. They love to do that when it comes to making characters. So hopefully that gets fixed for these people, whatever issues they're seeing.
Yep. For me, I'll say, and give some of my thoughts a little bit. For me, I'm one of those guys, like, I don't mind, you know, I'll mess around with an outfit here or there. It's not really particularly my thing. I like for my characters to look decent and not like a pile of flaming dog crap, if you know what I mean, but I'm not one of the guys that I'm going to go out there and I'm going to spend, like, buku EC and buku dilithium to get some outfits.
Well,
and
I think ultimately probably what it's coming down to is, do you have a good graphics card, or are you playing on integrated graphics? That is probably the difference between it looking decent and it looking like rubbish.
That's definitely a factor, and for a lot of people, I would say, I like to give the benefit of the doubt and assume, let's say a mid-grade PC. Let's say a mid-grade PC for some of this. It's, to some extent, I can kind of see where some of the people were coming from the screenshots that they posted, and I can see where a bit of the controversy comes in, and there were actually some folks that were talking about on the stream, and there has been some scuttlebutt that Cryptic might actually roll this back, polish it up a little bit, and then launch it back out. Now I'm just curious, with some of that, what would be your guys' thoughts if they decided to go that route?
I would be shocked. Not because I think it's good, but that they've never rolled anything back before, ever.
I mean, for me, that's progress. They're willing to be like, okay, this didn't go nearly as smoothly as we wanted it to. We're taking it back. We're going to fix it. The next time it comes out, it's going to be what y'all want more so. So, to me, I wouldn't mind it at all. They take that back. We go back to what we're used to seeing, which is nice. You know, a lot of people are happy with that anyway. And then when they come back out with it again, oh, okay, this does look better. Okay, I can understand this change. So, I have no problem with that. One thing I wish they would do, though, is, and this would probably help out a lot of players, is if they do roll this back, let's say they do roll this back, before it launches on holodeck for the second time, I would, you know, for whatever it's worth, I would implore to the Cryptic devs, roll this out on Tribble server for at least a week before it hits holodeck, so people can see the difference. Because that would give players a chance, okay, what is coming to holodeck, that I can go ahead and see what's going on with my ground tune, and see if it's for better or for worse. Give an idea.
It may be a dumb question, but how many people actually get on holodeck? Or whatever, the test server?
Tribble.
I mean, from what their changes is, pretty much everybody has access to Tribble now, so...
I mean, everybody does, but how many people actually use that?
Don't know. That's why I figure I might as well say it. Pretty much all players now, since they did the subscription changes and they announced that everybody would have access to Tribble, you got access to it and you can see some of these changes early, go ahead and do it. And then if they would put them on Tribble early, people could see it and know it's coming. Instead of being shocked the moment it comes out.
I'm all for it, but I really don't think the majority of players even know that Tribble even exists or care, frankly.
I would say that's probably their loss.
And it definitely is, but so it's good that we bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, more people that can test on Tribble, especially when new content is on the rare occasion released early so we can test it, it's always good to see. More player feedback, the better.
I think at this point we could probably chalk this up to some mixed opinions among the hosts of the show here. We've got there's some good points, definitely, and there's also some potential negative points that can be brought up as well. But moving along, we have our PC patch notes for the 23rd. Now, this was the first round of patch notes that they brought with us. This gave us our 9th anniversary event. And this also gave us our new Mirror Discovery episodes, the Pacum, is that however you say that? Words. Thank you. And then Illusion of Communication. Then we also have our new Personal Endeavor system, which brought some pretty interesting stuff with it. We'll talk a little bit about that as one of the major features in just a minute. Then we also have the Battle at the Binary Stars is now available all the time. It also now has advanced and elite difficulties, so we don't have to wait for an event just to play it now, which can be kind of fun. Then it looks like they've resolved a lot of issues with some quality of life type of stuff and fixed quite a few bugs. Like I say, there's a lot of stuff to actually go through here, so I'm not exactly going to read everything off. But for some of you guys, or for you two guys, what is some of the stuff that stands out to you?
Well, quite honestly, there was a few things. I mean, once we get to personal endeavors, tap my shoulder again, I'll let you know what I'm thinking about that so far, because I tested it quite a bit on Tribble and now on Holodeck. I'm liking the fact that Battle of the Binary Stars is back and more than just normal, because now that can actually be a challenge in advanced and elite difficulty, considering the amount of enemies on the field and everything. That can actually be a very good challenge. It's what we were actually asking for when it first came out. That's good. I can see an irritation for some people. You can't purchase anything from any in-game stores when you have at the very least one item in an overflow bag. I can see that be a slight irritation. You're going to go buy something, and it's like, sorry, you can't. You get something in the overflow bag, and you're trying to buy like a console from your reclaim store. Well, I can see that as a very, very slight irritation, just to make for sure that's there. I don't mind it, because I try to get rid of that overflow bag as soon as I see it, but I can see possible irritation. Let's see here. Resolve an issue preventing the Jim'Hadar wingmen from ever being able to critically hit. So we're talking about those two built-in pets that you're using with those Jim'Hadar Vanguard ships, which for me, my favorite is the warship, because that thing is a freaking beast. Well, apparently this whole time, they were unable to do critical hits. They didn't have their own critical hit chance. So that's just going to help them do extra damage that they weren't doing before to help your build out. And they were already doing good damage anyway. So that's definitely a help there. They fixed the Mirror Escort Carrier. Apparently it had lower healing values. We had that cause some traits to apply while not slotted. We've actually seen that on Tribble when me and Blade have been testing. That's one of the ones we were actually working on in the background. You would have traits that they were good traits, and you just didn't have room to slot them on to be active, and you'd still have the bonuses for them on Tribble. Terrible. Of course, they nerfed the Swarmers from the Hive Defense trait. We figured that was coming. And then just the resolved an issue that prevented the Vanguard species trait from applying. So you should see a little bit more damage from that particular species trait in your build now. I mean, there was a whole lot that was definitely fixed. Those are just the few that stood out to me.
So you're talking about patch notes from the 23rd, right? I'm curious. I hate to change the subject on without a clutch, but what does Party Patrol is now playable mean on the 25th patch notes?
There was a slight bug, and which we'll use that as a segue to look at the 25th patch notes. But so let's go ahead and look at the 25th right quick, and then I'll answer that question for you, and then we'll talk about the personal endeavors a little bit. Alright, so basically for the few fixes they had for the personal endeavors, it resolved an issue where the perk window did not update immediately. So this personal endeavor tracks, which required defeating Terran Empire on ground or space now include Discovery-era enemies of that type. And it also resolved an issue where it would list the requirements for completing certain types of TFOs as 0 of 1, when it in actuality it should have been 0 of 3 in some instances. Now, this gets into your issue that we were talking about, Sir Crayo, and this is the Party Patrol is now available to play. Well, you know that funny little thing, you go down to the academy, you chase around the mini-queues. I don't know what it was, some kind of hanky something on the back end, and that was actually not available on opening day. But now it actually is. So that's the issue that we had with that. But, yeah. Like I say, not really a lot on the 25th. This is mainly correcting a few of the issues that had arisen. And one of the issues that I will point out really quickly for you guys, it is a known issue. When a player initially logs in each day, the Personal Endeavor UI missions will sometimes count as completed until the player moves to another map. So, if you have one that says deal anti-proton damage as a hypothetical, then it will show that as being completed until you change maps, and then you can actually see your progress. So that is a known bug that they're working to fix. They should have that patched pretty quickly, my guess would be. Alright. Now that we've attacked some of the core bits of the patch notes, I saved the personal endeavors for last, because I know all three of us are going to have some thoughts on this one, and how it's going, so I will start with you guys and whoever wants to go first.
I'll be honest, I haven't played it yet, because it keeps getting hidden in the UI.
Okay, then I guess I'll start. Okay, so like I said, I tested this out on Tribble. I actually got some decent things where I could see what some of the damage boosts were going to be in this system. And I've gotten pretty much all survival when it comes to holodeck. Go figure. On Tribble I get all the damage boosters. On holodeck I get all the survival boosters. So, funny thing. But I did the math. The initial thing I'm seeing on the math, and this is why I'm hoping and I'm praying that they do, like they've said on the stream when this launches, they're going to do weekends where we can boost the experience we're getting, where we can get multiple over a weekend or whatnot. Because what the math is showing me right now is the experience you get if you do all three endeavors every day. You're going to get 1 perk point every 2 days. And that's if you do all three endeavors. That's not counting the universal. I'm just talking about the 3 personal endeavors. If you do all 3 every single day, the experience from all 3 are the exact same every day. You'll get 1 perk point every 2. Well, with all the things that are available in this system, it's going to take a maximum of 480 perk points to max out everything for ground and space. Considering it's random, it's going to take 480 perk points to get everything maxed out. That's going to take 960 days to get all those perk points. On the rough average, without boosts, it's 1 perk point every 2 days. That equals up to about 2.6 years. So that's why I'm hoping and praying there is an experience boost to this system. Because 2.6 years on this rough math is a very long time to wait until you can max out everything. And depending on how the rolls are, there were some rolls on Tribble I've seen recently where all I get is 3 ground boosts. If you're a space guy, that's what you focus on. You get a couple of perk points where all 3 of your choices are ground boosts. You're going to get irritated. And vice versa. If you love to specialize on ground builds and your options end up being 3 space choices, it's going to irritate you as well. So that's why I'm saying, number 1, I hope there are multiple boosts on the experience for the progress of getting through these personal endeavors, getting more points sooner. Because I can see that long of a grind doing all 3 every day, which most people might not be able to do, depending on what it is, would be irksome at best. But, from what I'm seeing so far, the boosts I have on holodeck for the various things, I'm looking at drain resist maxing out at plus 30%, plus 30 drain resist in space. I'm looking at a 15% max hull and a 15% max shields. which is not bad. And you'll see that in your base stats. So when you're sitting in K7 and you activate that 1%, you'll actually see your shields go up 1%. You actually see the results of this system in your stats. When I was doing the math on Tribble, when I was actually getting damage boosts, you're getting a 0.5% for crit chance every point, if you're getting the same amount every point. So every 2 points, you're getting 1% crit chance. So it ends up being 7.5% crit chance when you max out all 15 points that go into your base stats. You're looking at 30% crit severity based on 2% every point. And you're looking at a 30% damage boost to energy and projectile weapons, which I would assume is a category 1 from what I'm seeing. Now that's huge over the long term. When you've maxed out those 4 stats just for damage, and they're showing up in the base stats, I'm looking at budget builds that I do are now going to have 16 to 17% crit chance, and they're going to have close to 100% crit severity, with 2 category 1 boosts for energy and projectile damage. At the high level, it's even more substantial because with that kind of crit chance and severity bonus, your Spire consoles are not as needed as they once were. You can actually pop those in and out with Lucari consoles because you won't need the extra crit chance from the consoles. You've made up for it with maxed out crit chance in the Personal Endeavor. You can pop in 1 or 2 Lucari consoles, and that way you've got possible activatable heals that are pretty powerful. You can mix, match, and play with your build a lot more when this system is maxed out because there's so many more boosts to your entire build. And it's going to give you a lot more options. So I like the end result of what we're looking at as far as this because it's boosting survival as far as damage negation for resists, drain resists. We're looking at damage boosts. We're looking at control resist. I've got exotic damage. We've got hull regen, impulse speed, turn rate, shield hardness. I mean, there's a lot of good things here. And if I remember correctly, on the ground traits, I think I was seeing a 4% for ranged weapon damage on ground, so it could max out to up to 60% range damage and 60% of the melee damage. And then you had +4 to kit performance on the first point, so that could max out to up to, if it stays the same every point, up to +60 for kit performance. There's a lot of good things going here. My only irritation right now, like I said, is going on the rough math I'm seeing. 2.6 years is a long time before you get everything maxed out, and because there are 3 random choices every time, it could take you most of that time to max out what you want to max out with a whole lot of things that you might not see as needed, depending on how you build, or if you're building more for space than ground or vice versa. You might be getting a lot of choices that don't even help what you're trying to go for. So I'm definitely hoping that when we do these double experience weekends, it doubles what you're getting for your personal endeavors. So instead of 1 point every 2 days, pretty much for that weekend, you're getting a point every day of that weekend, which is up to 5 days, if it's timed right. So that's 5 perk points in a weekend. That can help speed it up some. And I'm hoping that happens more often. Because that long of a grind could actually get people away from it, where they don't want to do it as much. And it's very daunting to new players that might come in, let's say, summer event or winter event of this year. They're starting 6 months to a year after us that just came in, and we're starting at day 1. Well, they're seeing this long of a grind that we've already been in for a year. They're having to do longer, potentially, I guess, is the way to say it, than what we have left. It's a very daunting thing. At the same time, it keeps you busy for a long time. I just think that length of time is a bit excessive. Other than that, I'm liking what I'm seeing for the boosts. I'm liking we have reroll tokens when it comes to something you might not be able to do readily. You can reroll it, have a chance to do something a little bit easier or more tuned to what you're doing if it rolls right. Maybe a EFO that you're used to doing anyway, or damage that you've already built for. Now you've re-rolled and you can do that damage, get it done faster. So it's definitely got promise. I just have one or two issues with it.
Okay, I guess I can see that. But as far as for me personally, I like what I see, and I kind of have similar thoughts to Timber on that. And there's definitely some good stuff to be had there. And keep in mind, folks, this is an account-wide buff. So in my case, I got lucky. The first two that I got, where I like to play around in space quite a bit, I was able to pick up a point in the critical severity for 2% of that, and then 0.5% into the critical chance. So I actually lucked out in that department. So that means now, whenever I go to any of my other tunes, they're going to start out with an additional 2% critical chance, not critical chance, 2% critical severity, and 0.5% of critical chance. So there's definitely some good stuff to be had here. And at the same time, I kind of understand. I'm not saying necessarily that I agree with it. I think, in my personal opinion, there could have been another approach taken. But to some extent, I can understand why they made it a little bit random. Because at that point, you would have some people that if all they wanted is the damage increases for ground, they would do the damage increases for ground and max those out as quick as they can, and then that's it. Likewise with space, you'd have people that would max out all of the damage increases for space, or in my case, I might go for something like the damage resistances first, and then after that, people may not care, and they won't interact with the system. So to some extent, I can understand why they did it. Though for me, I think that there could have been a different approach taken if that was a concern. But there's definitely a lot of good stuff here. I have to say that I do think, like you do, that I wish that it wasn't going to take nearly as long, and I hope that this is just the first iteration of it. This is just to roll the system out, see how well people like it, see how it's going to work, and from there they may incorporate some bonuses or something along the way, like you suggested. Maybe one weekend, every so often, they give us increased experience for it. Or whatever it is. But yeah, definitely some good stuff to be keeping our eye on. If they do make any changes, we'll be sure to let you guys know. But one of the big things I did want to touch base on really quickly, because it is going to be going on until, I believe it is this Thursday. We're currently in the midst of a key ring bundle and a key sale to celebrate, I guess, the anniversary a little bit, as well as the release of the new Styx Dreadnought. So, for those of you that are looking to buy keys, now's a great time to do it. Especially if you plan on buying more than 20 keys anyway. Now you can buy those same 20 keys and get yourself an Ultimate Tech upgrade on top of that. Your Ultimate Tech upgrades, they don't cost any dilithium to apply, and they'll take a item straight to the current level of Mark 15 Epic, which is the highest you can get. So that is a very nice little additional thing. And then finally, of course, we have our Welcome to Discovery blog. This is basically linking the trailer. This is from our executive producer, basically saying welcome to the new content, that sort of thing. But yeah, any, I guess, final thoughts from you guys before we move on to the budget build?
I don't know. I want to say something, but I'm just not, so.
Fair enough. What about you, Sir Timber? Any final thoughts before the budget build?
No.
I don't want to seem like a sourpuss, so I'm not going to say anything later. You can put it in the notes if you want.
All good. But anyway, like I say, definitely some mixed opinions on, from the hosts on some of this stuff. But we'll probably discuss a little bit off camera and whatnot. But anyway, this week's budget build is actually a request from a viewer and a good friend of ours. He had gone out and he had a box laying around. He figured, what the heck, I'm going to crack it open. I've never flown a Decora. What can I really do with it? And since he had some Ferenginar plasma beams laying around, but he really wasn't sure what way he wanted to take the ship, he asked us to help him out a little bit. So this week we're doing what we call a dime budget. Now the dime budgets are basically the same thing as our bare bones budgets, except in this instance, instead of a standard 2 million EC spending limit, we have about 10 million EC to work with. So that's going to be a bit more flexible than some of our other budget builds. Otherwise, all of the other items have to be free or as cheap as possible. Now for the Decora, this was the first Ferengi ship we had in game, and is...
It was the first lockbox ship ever, wasn't it?
I believe it is, now that you mention that. I'm actually pretty sure that it is. So, I'm very glad you remember that, good sir, because I did not realize that until after you said it. So yeah, our first ever lockbox ship in game. It still does well today. Now, I do think there's some, and this is just my personal opinion, at least for what I do, there's definitely some ships that I feel that are going to outclass it. But if you're looking for a good starter ship, if you're just looking for something fun to play with, or you just like Ferengi ships, whatever it is, this is definitely a good ship to have around. Now for this particular vessel, it's a 4-4 layout. That means you have 4 weapons in the front, 4 weapons in the back. Then for its console layout, you have 4 engineering, 3 science, and 4 tactical. So you've got a pretty decent setup as far as that goes. Then you also have 4 device slots. Now for his weapons, he already had some Ferenginar plasma beams laying around, so that took care of most of the weapons that needed to be picked up. Now, in the front of the ship, we do have the Romulan experimental plasma beam array to go with his plasma theme that he wanted to go with. And we also have our particle emission plasma torpedo, or a PEP torp, as it's more commonly known as. This is basically going to do a large chunk of kinetic damage, and then once it explodes, it's going to leave a nice little plasma cloud that's going to burn the enemy hulls and is going to whittle them down very, very quickly.
Crispy.
Pretty much. Exactly what he said, pretty much. So, since he had most of the weapons anyway, that took care of a lot of the grind he normally would have had to have done, and took care of a lot of the expense. Now, for the shields, the deflector, the engines, the warp core, since he wanted to go for more pew-pew and more in-your-face damage dealing, we hooked him up with the Bajor defense set, which is going to have some nice set bonuses that he can call on. And we have the deflector, the engines, and the shields. Then we also have for the warp core, since I don't believe he had access to it, or he never said that he did, we have our temporal phase overcharged core, which is a very frequent core that we use here on the show, because in our opinion it is very hard to beat this core on the budget end. Reason being, it's going to give you a temporal negotiator style effect whenever you activate its warp core capacitor, which is basically going to cut your cooldowns in half for the duration that it's active. So we'll take a look at the set bonuses in just a moment. And then his rear weapons are some of his Ferenginar plasmas that he had laying around. Then for our devices, we have 4 slots that we could use here. We usually like to think of them as personal preference though. However, some of the devices we do like to recommend, one in particular is the Subspace Field Modulator. Now this comes from the old Skirmish mission, and whenever you activate this, you'll basically get a free neutronium alloy armor worth of resistance value out of it. The only downside is it does debuff you for a minus 400 protonic damage resist rating. Now, that can be a bit of a double-edged sword depending on when or where you use it, so that is something to keep in mind whenever you do go to activate the device. Some of the other devices include the energy amplifier batteries, maybe you're a fan of Jevonite hardpoints, or some of the standard battery types. You've got a lot of options with your devices. Now for the engineering consoles, first and foremost we have our Trillium D plating from the Ragnarok mission. This is a very good console to have on the budget end. It's basically a neutronium armor and a field generator slammed into one thing. It's going to give you a nice chunk of damage resistance across the board, and it's also going to give you a nice chunk of shield capacity on top of that.
Did you say a fair chunk or just a nice chunk, Sarah?
I would actually say a fair chunk, because it actually gives pretty comparable to a field generator. And in each case, it doesn't give as much value as a pure neutronium or a pure field generator, but it gives pretty darn close without actually being the two things fused, if you know what I mean. Then for our second console, we have the Reinforced Armaments. This is from the Beyond the Nexus mission, and we're taking advantage of this console mainly for the EPS that it's going to give us. This is going to let our power come back a lot faster after it's been transferred or after it's been used up, and that's always nice to have on the budget end. Then we have our Assimilated Module. This is going to give a nice little bit of critical chance at severity, as well as a little bit of control expertise for those that are curious. Then we also have our 0-point energy conduit. The main thing this is going to give us here is the critical chance and round out the two-piece with the weapon, and we'll look at our set bonuses in just a moment and explain why we're using some of those. For our science consoles, we have the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. This is going to give a nice chunk of critical severity and critical chance based on Ox power. It's also going to give a fairly hefty chunk of shield capacity, as well as giving a little bit of shield damage resistance. So this is one of those rare consoles that touches pretty much all three areas and allows you to stay alive a lot longer while also potentially dealing a lot more damage. Then we have our Piezoelectric Focuser from the Lucari rep. This is going to boost Polaron damage, or plasma in this case. It's also going to give another little bit of shield cap, as well as some turn rate. So all around, going to be a very great console to have. Then finally, we have our Plasma Wave, which is going to give a nice chunk of plasma damage, basically a free tactical console's worth of damage, essentially. And it's also going to have that nice Plasma Cone activatable. So think of it something like the Galax Dreadnought with its saucer separated, except in this case, instead of dealing a wide-angle phaser lance, you're doing a wide-angle plasma attack. And then our tactical consoles are just the standard plasma infuser tactical consoles. Now, really quickly to touch base on some of the set bonuses, because these are going to be very integral parts of the build. Click those before I forget about those. Now for our engines, you can see we have the hull scraping, which is going to be a nice little thing that he can do to deal some damage. This is going to allow him to activate ramming speed at 90% hull. So depending on how he plays his cards, that could allow him to do a little bit more damage, though he is going to have to heal back afterwards. And you also have for your deflector the weapon capacitor dampening. So if you manage to activate a control power, you're going to be debuffing the foes for 9.1% of their outgoing weapon damage. Now, we didn't include really any control powers on the ship, but it is worth making a note of anyway, because this is a very potent power that, depending on how he plays his cards, once he gets to the higher levels with the ship, that could potentially come in handy for him. Then finally, we have the shields, which have a baked-in Resol mod, but the big thing here is the retaliatory coronal shield ejection. And basically, every so often, once every 30 seconds per individual shield facing, if your shields drop to 0, they blast out a lot of plasma damage toward the enemies, so this is going to be a very nice thing that's going to benefit from plasma damage as well. Really quickly for our set bonuses, you're going to have mainly your 2 set is what we're going with here, which is going to buff plasma damage by 19%. This is going to be a category 1. Not really going to benefit too awful much from the 3 set bonus, aside from doubling the range of the coronal ejection, but it is worth making a note of. Then finally for our 2-piece Romulan that we have with our 0-point, we also have, and this also does give a little bit of disruptor damage as well, because that's the alternate energy type for the Romulans. Then we have plasma energy weapon damage. And then we have a bit of EPS, so some extra EPS flow, which is going to benefit very nicely. So that's some of the set bonuses that we have active on the ship. Now for our skill loadout, this is pretty much our standard skill loadout we usually give to people here on the show. It's 14 engineering, 14 science, 18 tactical, because we try to go more towards the middle of the road with these things, unless people request otherwise. Now, I'm not going to go into details on why we picked all of the skills that we did. If people want me to do that at some point, we can get you guys a video where we explain why we picked the certain skills that we did. But for those of you that just want to copy a build, can really quickly see our lieutenant level skills, our lieutenant commander, commander rank skills, captain, and then of course the admiral level skills. For specializations, we wanted to give him a good bit of power while also balancing it out and giving him some healing ability to stay alive. We have our intel as primary, miracle worker as secondary. An alternate to miracle worker could be perhaps strategist if he feels miracle worker isn't doing it for him. So that is one thing I did want to mention there. Then, coming into our traits, now he is on the KDF side, so that means he is a tactical captain in this case, is what he'd said. Now for his personal space traits, he already had this one handy in a box, so we included his good day to die on the build. Then we have beam barrage, which is going to be very good. This is the Beam R&D crafting trait. We always assume that you've leveled at least one R&D crafting school, and in this case we assume that he picked his beams, since it's going to be his primary weapon type. Then we also have the Beam training for extra free beam damage. We have Elusive for free defensive value. Fleet Coordinator for free damage based on how many people are in the team, including yourself. 2% minimum, up to a 10% maximum. Last-ditch effort, which is the career-specific trait for tactical officers. If you're not a tactical officer, but you would like to use the build anyway, swap out last-ditch effort and go down and a good day to die for some of your own career-specific traits, and you are good to go in that department. We have Nanite Repair Matrix, which is going to be a nice little heal whenever you drop below 50%. It can happen once every 90 seconds. Point Blank Shot from House Peg, which is going to give you a pretty hefty Category 2 bonus the closer you are to the target, up to a certain maximum of damage. Then we also have Redirected Armor Plating. Whenever his ship is shot from behind or on the sides, he's going to get a pretty hefty chunk of damage resistance. Now, although his main goal is to deal damage, we wanted to include a bit of survival into the build. That way he's not completely defenseless and explodes whenever something so much as sneezes in his general direction. Now, going along that same route, we have, for Starship traits, the Best Defense, which is going to grant a hull healing buff along with normal effects to attack patterns. We have Improved Predictive Algorithms for the stuff that it gives you from Intel, which is a little bit of accuracy and damage increasing. And we have Going the Extra Mile. Whenever you heal someone while they're above 90% maximum hull, they'll gain a bit of temporary HP while that is active. Since he's going to be working with Intel and Miracle Worker anyway, we figured, why the heck not? For Space Reps, we have Advanced Targeting Systems for the free severity, the Aux Power Offense, which is going to give a bit of accuracy and Category 2 boosting in terms of damage, Precision for free critical hit chance, and then we have our Energy Refrequencer here as the fourth one to squeak a little extra survival out of the ship. If he feels enough survival is on there already, could potentially swap that out for something more offensively focused. In terms of active reputations, we have Anti-Time Entanglement Singularity, which is a nice little AoE kick in the pants, physical damage and slow ability to foes. Then we also have our Biomolecular Shield Generator. This is going to reduce damage taken by the shields while you're inside the bubble, as well as provide slight bits of healing and regen. Deploy sensor interference platform as an oh crap I'm gonna die type of thing. You can pop this ability and it will poof up a little sensor platform that will taunt enemies to itself until the duration runs out or until it is destroyed, whichever of those two things comes first. Then we have our quantum singularity manipulation, and this is going to increase your science stats by a pretty hefty amount across the board for a short time, as well as granting a temporary cloaking effect to the ship. Now, to get a little bit more out of your anti-time, throw some exotic buffs you may have first, and then follow up with your quantum singularity, and then drop your anti-time or any control powers you may have on top of the foes, and you will get a bit more bang for your buck in that department. Now comes the thing that ties it all together, the bridge officer layout. Now, for this particular ship, you have a Lieutenant Commander Tactical, Ensign Tactical, Commander Engineering, and Lieutenant Engineering, as well as a Lieutenant Science for the ship. So you're kind of locked into what you can do. There is no universal seating on the ship. That is one of the only major downsides to the vessel. But for the Lieutenant Commander Tactical, we went with our Tactical Team 1. It's going to redirect our shields automatically and purge boarding parties.
I wish to file a complaint. There are no drawbacks to a Ferengi vessel.
And there's the Negus, just when we need it. I am sorry, Grand Negus. I will amend this in post.
Keep my eye on you.
Well, I get a feeling I'm going to get a visit from the Liquidators later, folks. But, continuing along, we have our attack pattern beta, which is going to debuff enemies whenever we shoot at them. This is going to be nice for increasing damage. We also have our beam fire at will 3, since the primary source of damage for the ship is going to be the beams. And since we have a 4th tactical power and a torpedo on the build, we have a torpedo spread, which is going to be very nice for burning them with the plasma damage. Then we have, for our engineering abilities, on the Lieutenant Engineering, we have our engineering team that's going to purge certain things like Viral Matrix, as well as heal the hull a bit. Then we have Reverse Shield Polarity, which is going to recharge shields in a pinch based off of incoming damage, so we can potentially recharge our shields all the way back to full if we play our cards right with this ability. Then for the Commander Engineering, we have our emergency power to engines 1. This is going to be
power, that's all, folks.
Yeah, it's one of them days. Y'all will get a kick out of this episode title when we get this uploaded later, but yeah, it's definitely been one of those days. But our emergency power to engines is going to be a nice little get the heck out of Dodge quickly power whenever we need it. It's going to increase power to our engines as well as letting us go a little bit faster for the time being. Then we also have one of our 2 copies of auxiliary power to SIF. Now, I went with aux to SIF again to kind of balance it out in terms of damage. So, if he feels like he's got enough survival built in, he could swap one of them out and go towards an aux to bat build, perhaps. Depends on what he wants to do overall for his end goals, but this is what I hooked him up with in the meantime. And then for our last engineering power, we have emergency power to weapons 3. Now, you can alternate between those 2 emergency power abilities and have both of them up generally at the same time. And then for our Lieutenant Science, coming into our last powers, we have Science Team, which is going to purge certain debuffs like a subnucleonic effect, as well as recharge our shields a bit. And then we have our Heal Over Time effect, which purges board plasma fires and various other hazard effects in the term of hazard, in the case of hazard emitters. Blech, words. So that's pretty much what we've got for a budget build this evening. Any comments and thoughts on this one, guys?
It's a build. And what excitement! It's a Ferengi build! They're the best!
Well, there you have it, folks. It's from the Grand Negus himself, so it's got to be true. It's got to be, you know, right?
Would I lie to people like you? Yes, I would! Ha ha ha!
If you thought you could make Latinum, you would. But, anyways, that's what we got for the budget build this evening. As you can see, guys, we do take requests with this stuff, so let us know if you have any of that. As far as on the bugs front, now, this is one that I have been hearing for a while now, and I'm going to need your guys' help a little bit to try to track this down. Now, I have heard some people saying that the torpedo damage was scaled way up by enemies, and I've heard some people saying that it could be bug-related. Now, on that note comes the difficult part of actually proving what's a bug and what potentially could be simply someone needing to update their build a little bit. I need you guys that are experiencing this, I guess, hyperscaling of the torpedo damage. I need you guys to get me some combat logs and some data showing whenever this is happening, how much are you getting hit for? What type of build do you have? What types of buffs do you have? A lot of that could come from a combat log. And in showing me that, I can break that down and hopefully finally get this one put to bed for you guys. So if you have anything out there that could potentially let us squash this one once and for all, that is going to be very much appreciated. I would also appreciate it if you guys don't mind including a copy of your build with the combat log so I could see what you were running at the time. And it could be that maybe there's just a weird interaction going on between some traits that's unintended and you're not getting the values you're supposed to for defense. And it could be that the enemy is just borked. It really depends. Without having data, and this is the problem I've ran into, without having data and a pretty good sample size, there's no way to know what's what. Pretty much at this point, we don't know what we don't know. And I know the devs want to get stuff like that fixed, and I know you guys out there want it fixed, so let me know what you guys can find, and we will be sure to pass that along to them. But anyways, that's what we've got for a show this week, guys. We're not going to have our RP corner this week. Artie's had some personal stuff he's had to take care of, but hopefully he'll be back with us next week, and we're hoping we'll be able to get our RP episodes going again for you guys here pretty soon. It just depends on how everybody's schedules fall, because we want to see what happens with our extragalactic invasion.
I've got an extragalactic. Never mind.
Oh dear. Inside joke if y'all are wondering. But anyways, folks, that's what we've got for a show this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. But on our way out the door, shout out to our good friends over at the Temporal Armada. Very cool bunch of people. Be sure to check them out as well. We've got a lot of good content for you guys. Also, a shout out to our other good friends over at the Kurtang Pirate Radio. The party is there. They always have some good music selections going. I gotta give them credit on that.
Do they just play like Star Trek music or what? Oh,
any music.
Okay. Well, I may have...
They do play a little bit of... Oh,
well, I was
sorry.
gonna say I may have to check that out then.
Oh, you'll have to do that. They play a little bit of... they do play some sci-fi type music, but they play a lot of, your classic rocks and stuff like that, too.
What was it called again?
So, it is the Kurtang Pirate Radio. So yeah, be sure to check them out, and if you're looking to jam out in the middle of battle, they're not going to let you down. But anyways, folks, that's what we've got for this week. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you've got any requests for budget builds, feel free to let us know. We do take requests, as you guys see. That's what came about tonight. Just say, hey, this is the kind of budget I've got. This is the ship I'm wanting to work with. What can you guys do for me? We'll hook you up on that. If you feel that your gear and your setup are in order, but it's your piloting that needs a little bit of work, then feel free to get a brief little video clip to us somewhere or another showing us where you're at with your piloting. We can offer you some tips and tricks on improving, perhaps even go on a couple of runs with you and help you iron out some of the details. Just really depends on what you guys need. But if you have any ideas for the RP Corner, feel free to let Artie know. He does take requests on that, and he may just talk about your topic on air. But for now, folks, this is the Pilot Review Show, reminding you to have your tribbles spayed or neutered.
That's right. Help control the tribble population. Everybody, have a good night.